I was halfway through my lunch break, pushing a fork through a sad excuse for a salad at my desk, when my coworker's gasp sliced through the hum of the office. "Oh my God, Mara, isn't this your stepdaughter?" Her voice made my stomach clench before I even knew why. I looked up and saw Jennifer standing by my desk, her eyes wide, her phone held out like it was something radioactive. My heart started pounding, stupidly, before I even took the phone from her. On the screen was a photo, and there she was. Lily, the little girl I'd carried on my hip, bandaged, soothed, raised from the time she was 3 years old, now a woman in a white wedding gown, a lace bodice, a flowing skirt, flowers woven into her dark hair, her head thrown back in a laugh I knew by heart, dimples deep in her cheeks, eyes crinkled at the corners. She was holding hands with a man I'd never seen before in my life. I felt the world tilt. I snatched the phone from Jennifer's hand so fast I almost dropped it. My fingers shook as I swiped. Another photo, and another, and another. Lily on the aisle, Lily holding a bouquet, Lily cutting a cake, Lily dancing under string lights, Lily posing with a bridal party, with friends, with people I didn't recognize. And then I saw him, Richard, my husband of 21 years, in a tailored navy suit, tie perfectly knotted, standing beside the groom and Lily, grinning so wide you'd think he just won the lottery. He was in the family photos. He was in the group toasts. There was even a shot of him holding a microphone, obviously giving a speech, laughing, his eyes misty. He was there, at our stepdaughter's wedding, a wedding I knew nothing about. I couldn't breathe. The office noise blurred into a distant echo. The fluorescent light seemed suddenly too bright. I stared at the screen until my vision swam. "Mara, are you okay? You've gone completely pale," Jennifer whispered, reaching for my arm. I couldn't answer her. I just kept scrolling, as if somewhere in that stream of perfect, filtered happiness I'd see myself magically appear. Maybe in the background, maybe at a table, maybe... No, I wasn't there. There was a photo of Lily tossing her bouquet, of the groom dipping her low on the dance floor, of Richard hugging her, both of them crying, confetti stuck in his hair. But not a single frame with me in it. Not one. My throat burned. My vision stung. I remembered Lily's small hand in mine on her first day of kindergarten. The way she'd whispered, "Don't let go, Mama Mara." I remembered teenage Lily sobbing in my lap over her first heartbreak, mascara streaked down her cheeks as I stroked her hair and told her she deserved better. I remembered the time she had the flu in high school and I'd stayed up all night, holding her hair back while she vomited, then changing her sheets, bringing her water, checking her temperature every hour. I remember the day she called me in college just to say, "I know you're not my real mom on paper, but you're the only one who ever showed up like one." Yet on the biggest day of her life, I was nowhere. I, I need a minute, I croaked. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. I shoved Jennifer's phone back into her hand and stumbled out of my cubicle, ignoring her concern. "Mara, talk to me." My legs carried me to the bathroom on autopilot. Once the stall door was locked, I finally fell apart. I slid down onto the closed toilet seat, pressed my palms over my mouth, and sobbed so hard my ribs hurt. The tiled walls, the faint smell of bleach, the flicker of the fluorescent light, it all felt like a bad dream. 21 years. 21 years of ballet recitals, school conferences, birthday parties I'd planned down to the last balloon. 21 years of scrubbing grass stains out of her soccer jersey, teaching her to drive, helping her fill out college applications. I'd worked night shifts at the hospital so I could be there for field trips and school plays. And somehow I had become someone easy to edit out of the story. All at once, a memory punched through the grief. The house. 3 years earlier, when Lily graduated from college, I had done something people told me was too much. I bought her a house. It wasn't a mansion, nothing extravagant. A small 3-bedroom bungalow in a safe neighborhood with trees that turned gold in the fall and neighbors who waved when you drove by. It cost me nearly every cent of what I'd spent 15 years saving as a nurse. Double shifts, holidays, weekends, missed breaks. Richard had said, "Mara, it's a lot. We could just help her with rent." But I'd smiled and said, "I want her to have something that's hers. Something solid, Something that says, you have roots. You're safe. When I'd handed Lily the keys, she'd cried, thrown her arms around me, buried her face in my neck, and choked out, "You're the best mom in the world, you know that?" The memory felt like a cruel joke now. If I was the best mom in the world, why was I good enough to buy her a house, but not good enough to stand beside her on her wedding day? Eventually, the storm of sobs slowed enough for me to breathe. I splashed cold water on my face, avoiding my reflection in the mirror for as long as I could. When I finally looked up, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Puffy eyes, smeared mascara, lines I hadn't noticed growing deeper over the past few years. "I need to go home," I whispered to myself. I left the hospital early with a vague, "I'm not feeling well," to my supervisor, which wasn't entirely a lie. My stomach churned the entire drive home. The highway, the familiar exit, the turn onto our street, it all looked normal, as if the universe hadn't just shifted on its axis. Our front yard looked like a picture on a real estate flyer. Trimmed lawn, the rose bushes I'd planted last spring heavy with blooms, the porch swing gently creaking in the breeze. The porch light, set on the timer I'd programmed, flicked on as I pulled into the driveway. Everything looked exactly the same, except nothing would ever be the same again. I sat in the car for a full 5 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, rehearsing imaginary conversations in my head. When were you going to tell me? How could you? What did I do to deserve this? Every version ended with me crying and him apologizing, and somehow, it's still not being enough. Finally, I opened the door and went inside. Richard was in the living room, shoes off, feet up, a bowl of chips balanced on his chest, eyes glued to a game on TV. Just another weekday evening to him, apparently. He looked up when he heard the door. The second our eyes met, something in his expression shifted. The easy relaxation drained out of his face, replaced by something tight. Guilty. He knew. "Mara," he began. I held up a hand. "Don't," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Just answer one question first." He swallowed. "Okay. When was the wedding?" He stared at the TV for a second too long, then at the floor. "Saturday," he muttered. "Last Saturday." 3 days ago. 3 days. 3 days where he'd kissed me good morning, talked about gas prices, commented on the weather, stood in the bathroom brushing his teeth next to me, while having just watched our stepdaughter walk down the aisle without me. "And you were there," I said. It wasn't really a question. "She's my daughter," he replied automatically. Those 3 words sliced deeper than any scream. Not our daughter. My daughter. Like I was the hired help he'd forgotten to CC in an email. I stared at him. "I've been Lily's mother since she was 3, Richard. I'm the one who taught her to tie her shoes, who took her to the dentist, who stayed up all night when she had asthma attacks. I'm the one who fought the school when her teacher called her difficult, remember? Where was Carla then? Where was her biological mother?" He finally looked at me, and there it was. The guilt. But behind it, something uglier. That defensive stubbornness I'd seen a few times over the years when he knew he was wrong, but didn't want to admit it. "Carla was at the wedding too," he said quietly. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I had to sit down before my knees gave out. I sank into the armchair across from him, my ears ringing. Carla, the woman who had walked out on a 2-year-old to chase the next high. The woman whose absence I'd explained around for 2 decades, always softening the truth so Lily wouldn't feel unwanted. The woman who had missed birthdays and holidays and graduations because she was busy getting clean, except she never stayed that way. That Carla had been there, and I hadn't. "You invited your ex-wife," I said slowly, each word tasting like acid. "The woman who abandoned your child. The woman I spent 20 years cleaning up after. You invited her to Lily's wedding." My voice cracked. "But not me." His shoulders slumped. "It wasn't my choice," he mumbled. I laughed. It came out sharp and ugly. "Then whose was it? The fairy godmother? The wedding planner? Who exactly decided the woman who raised Lily wasn't welcome at her own daughter's wedding?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Lily had made that choice. The little girl who once couldn't fall asleep unless I sang to her had grown into a woman who decided I was expendable, less than. Someone you quietly erase when you're drawing your real family picture. Behind the rage and hurt, something else flared up. Something cold. Something clarifying. I stood up. I need to be alone, I said. Do not follow me. I went to our bedroom and locked the door. The bedspread looked exactly as it had that morning when I'd smoothed it. Same throw pillows, same folded blanket at the foot. It was the bed where Lily had crawled in between us after nightmares so many times I'd lost count. The bed where I'd lain awake waiting for her to come home from parties. The bed where I'd pictured her, wedding day, so many times. Me helping her zip her dress, doing her hair, fixing her veil. I sat on the edge and sobbed until my eyes ached. 21 years. 21 years of pouring my time, my money, my health, my heart into this family, into their family. And in one weekend, it had been made brutally clear. I did not belong. Not really. Not when it counted. But as the tears dried on my cheeks, something shifted inside me. The sadness didn't disappear, but anger slid into its place, cool and sharp. Not the kind of anger that throws plates or screams obscenities. A steadier kind. The kind that makes you start mentally rearranging your life. If they can erase me, I thought, staring at the wall, then I can erase a few things too. My mind leapt to the bungalow, to the big maple in the front yard, to the welcome home mat I'd picked out for Lily's porch. 3 years ago, I'd put that house in my name only. At the time, it had just been a legal technicality, a way to protect the asset in case anything ever happened to Richard's business. He'd agreed without much thought. Now, for the first time, I was grateful for my annoying habit of overthinking paperwork. That house was mine, paid for with my exhaustion, my overtime, my missed holidays. I had signed those documents alone. Something clicked. If Lily could decide I wasn't part of her future, I could decide the house I'd sacrificed so much to give her wasn't part of hers either. I lay awake the entire night, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house, the refrigerator humming, the faint creak of pipes, the muffled footsteps when Richard went to the guest room without a word. By dawn, my decision was made. I might not be able to rewrite the past 21 years, but I could choose how the next chapter began. And it was going to start with 3 words I never imagined I'd say about something I'd given to Lily with so much love. I'm selling it. I didn't sleep at all. I lay there in the dark, listening to the faint rumble of Richard walking back and forth in the guest room, the hum of the fridge, a car passing by outside. My body was exhausted, but my mind spun like it was wired to a generator. Wedding images kept flashing in front of me like a slideshow from hell. Lily laughing with her bridesmaids, Lily dancing with her groom, Lily hugging Richard while he cried, Lily standing next to Carla, both of them holding hands like a mother and daughter who'd weathered some noble storm together instead of the actual story. One had abandoned her child, the other had done the work. And me? Edited out, deleted, like a mistake in a draft. By the time the sun seeped through the curtains, my tears had dried, replaced with a tightness in my chest that wasn't grief anymore. It was something colder, clearer. Anger had a way of pulling everything into focus. I got up, showered, dressed for work on autopilot, and walked downstairs. Richard was at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, shadows under his eyes. He looked up like he'd rehearsed a speech all night. "Mara, we have to talk." I poured myself coffee as if we were going to discuss something ordinary. The spoon clinked against the mug. "We will," I said. "But first, I want to ask you something. I want you to be honest for once." He flinched. "Okay." "Why didn't anyone invite me?" I asked. "Not Lily, not you, not your parents. Nobody thought I deserved to be there?" He rubbed a hand over his face. "Lily, she said it would be awkward." "Awkward," I repeated. "For who?" "For everyone," he muttered. She said you wouldn't fit in." There it was, the sentence that would play over and over in my head for months afterward. You wouldn't fit in. At a wedding I'd spent 2 decades preparing her for, at a life I'd built around her, at a family table where I'd cooked every holiday meal. I set my mug down carefully so I didn't throw it. "Because what?" I asked. "Because I'm a nurse and not a lawyer? Because I shop sales while Carla posts photos in designer heels? Because I work double shifts instead of doing yoga retreats?" He stared at the wood grain on the table. "Carla's family, they're Different. They have money now. Connections. Lily wanted a certain kind of image. She said, he winced. She said you'd be out of place, that you'd embarrass her. Shali, I swallowed back the wave of nausea that rose in my throat. Out of place. Embarrassing. The woman who'd worked overtime so Lily could have braces, who'd skipped buying herself new shoes so Lily wouldn't feel left out when her friends got expensive dresses for prom. Let me get this straight, I said. Your daughter was ashamed of me, of the woman who raised her, and you just went along with that. She's my kid, he snapped, finally meeting my eyes. I didn't want to lose her again. I thought once the dust settled, we could fix it. I thought you'd never see the photos. You thought you could erase me in secret, I replied, like I was a stain on her perfect story. He opened his mouth to answer, but I held up my hand. Save it. I grabbed my purse and keys. Where are you going? He asked. To work, I said, because some of us still have lives that don't revolve around pretending everything is fine. I made it through half a shift before my supervisor pulled me aside. Mara, you look like you're going to collapse. Go home. Take a personal day. So I did something better. I went to see someone I should have gone to the minute I saw those photos. Phoebe. Phoebe Chang had been my roommate in college, the wild pre-law major who'd pulled midnight study sessions and dragged me out for greasy fries when she knew I was burning out. We drifted apart when I married Richard and stepped into instant motherhood, then reconnected a few years ago over coffee. She'd become one of the top family lawyers in the city. Her receptionist barely had time to say hello before Phoebe appeared in the doorway of her office. One look at my face and she stepped forward, wrapping me in a hug that undid me all over again. Oh, Mara, she said softly. I saw the pictures. Everyone saw them. I kept waiting for your face to show up in one. And then, it didn't. I found out at work, I said, voice raw, on Jennifer's phone, like some stranger. She guided me into a chair and handed me a box of tissues. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about the wedding, about Carla, about the words you wouldn't fit in, about 21 years suddenly feeling like a misunderstanding. When I finished, she sat back, eyes sharp in a way they hadn't been in college when we were just two girls sharing cheap wine and dreams. Okay, she said in her lawyer voice. There are two separate issues here. The emotional betrayal and your practical options. We can't fix the first today, but we can absolutely talk about the second. I'm not ready for divorce, I protested automatically, even though the word hadn't left my mind since the night before. Her expression softened. I didn't say you had to file today. I said we need to talk about options. And we're absolutely going to talk about that little house you bought for Lily. I felt a tiny, grim satisfaction that she remembered. I'd called her 3 years ago to double-check the paperwork. You put it in your name only, right? Phoebe asked, grabbing a legal pad. Yes, with money I saved before Richard and I merged our finances. I have pay stubs, bank statements, all of it. She nodded, scribbling. Good. That makes it your separate property, not marital. Richard doesn't have a legal claim on it if you decide to make changes. You mean sell it? Phoebe looked up. Is that what you want? I thought of Lily standing under an arch of flowers that I hadn't helped pick out, in a dress I hadn't zipped up, promising forever to a man I'd never been introduced to. I thought of her looking at Carla like she was the hero in the story. Yes, I said. The word surprised even me with how solid it sounded. I bought that house for the daughter who loved me enough to call me mom. I don't know who that woman is anymore, but she doesn't get a free house from someone she's ashamed of. Phoebe's mouth quirked into a fierce half-smile. Then let's make sure you're protected when you do it. We went through everything. The purchase documents, the dates, the accounts. She asked questions I never would have thought of, pointed out details that mattered in court. When we were done, she set her pen down. You can sell that house whenever you want, she said. Richard can shout until he's blue in the face, but legally it's yours. He has no right to stop you. For the first time since I'd seen those photos, a sliver of power slid back into place inside my chest. What about everything else? I asked quietly. The marriage, the joint savings, the retirement accounts. If I decide I'm done, her eyes went gentle. You've been married 21 years. That's considered a long-term marriage. You're entitled to half of what you built together during that time. Don't you dare let guilt talk you into walking away from what's yours. Honorum, I don't even know if I want it, I admitted. I just want out. Don't make permanent financial decisions on temporary emotions, she said. Anger is useful, but it's a terrible accountant. I huffed out a laugh that was half sob. You're still bossy, you know that? Always, she said, smiling. Then her face grew serious again. One more thing. I want you to do something when you get home. If it involves not throwing Richard's belongings on the lawn, I make no promises. She didn't laugh. Check your bank statements, she said. Joint accounts, credit cards, all of it. When people are hiding one betrayal, there's often another tucked right behind it. I frowned. You think he's cheating? I think a man who can stand in a tuxedo at his daughter's wedding without his wife beside him is capable of more than just cowardly silence. Just check. And call me if you find anything weird. When I got home, Richard's car was gone. He'd texted once while I was in Phoebe's office. We need to talk. Please, come home. I ignored it. Instead, I dug out a stack of bank statements from the file cabinet in the study, logged into our online accounts, and did what Phoebe had told me to do. At first, everything looked normal. Mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, occasional dinners out. A Target run here, a pharmacy visit there. Then I started noticing something. Cash withdrawals, not huge amounts. 200 here, 300 there, sometimes 150. Always ATM, always our lane as the cardholder. They went back 5 years. I grabbed a notepad and started adding them up, my nurse's brain slipping into the same efficient mode I used for medication calculations. 200 plus 300 plus 250 plus 400. By the time I reached the end, my hands were shaking. Over $50,000. 50,000 gone. I stared at the number, my mind scrambling for explanations. Maybe he'd been saving secretly for some surprise. Maybe he'd stashed cash at home for emergencies. Except we never had that conversation, and there was no mysterious safe or box of rainy day money anywhere in the house. Another name floated up in my mind, like something ugly rising to the surface of still water. Carla. My chest tightened. I picked up my phone and called Phoebe. Well, she answered. Did you find anything? I think my husband has been bleeding $50,000 out of our account, I said numbly. In cash. For years. She swore under her breath. Did you ask him where it went? He's not home. Good, she said. Text him to come home. Don't mention what you found. Act normal. When he's there, ask him. Don't accuse, just listen. Then we'll decide what to do. It felt like a script, so I followed it. I texted, when will you be home? We should talk. He replied immediately, leaving the office now, 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like an hour. I laid all the statements out on the kitchen table like evidence for a trial. When Richard walked in, he stopped in the doorway, eyes darting to the paper. What's all this? He asked, even though the way his face drained of color told me he already knew. You tell me, I said quietly. Where did $50,000 go, Richard? He dropped his keys, the clatter echoing through the room. I can explain. I'm listening. He sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. Carla. Needed help. Of course, of course. For 5 years, I asked. She needed help for 5 years? She went to rehab. Several times. She needed therapy, rent, food, clothes for interviews. She was trying to rebuild her life. So you rebuilt it, I said. With our money. Without telling me. He flinched. I was trying to do the right thing, Mara. She's Lily's mother. She deserved a second chance. Lily deserved the chance to know her real mom. My voice broke. I am her real mom. The kitchen went silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. Where was Carla when Lily had pneumonia at 7? I demanded. When her fever wouldn't break and I slept in a hospital chair for 3 nights? Where was Carla when Lily got her period at 12 and sobbed in the bathroom because she thought she was dying? Where was she for every recital, every science fair, every broken bone, every heartbreak? She was sick, he said helplessly. Addiction doesn't make your fingers log into the bank and steal from your wife. I snapped. What's your diagnosis for that, Richard? He slammed his palm down on the table. It wasn't stealing. It was our money. Money I thought we were saving for retirement, I shot back. For Lily's future. For emergencies. Not for your ex-wife's spa days. His jaw clenched. You don't know what she spent it on. I opened my phone and pulled up Carla's social media profile. I'd done it at work earlier out of morbid curiosity. Her pictures were all there. New clothes, restaurants, wellness retreats, and, my favorite, a photo of her and Lily in a bridal shop, both beaming, captioned, "So blessed to be here for my baby girl's big day." I turned the screen toward him. I think I have a decent guess. Something snapped in him then. Maybe shame curdled into defensiveness. Maybe the version of himself he wanted to be couldn't survive the mirror I was holding up. "Belle's not your daughter," he said suddenly, harshly. "Not really, you did a lot, I'm not denying that. But at the end of the day, she's mine and Carla's. You're just—" He stopped too late. Sometimes years of polite resentment condense into one moment. One sentence, one careless truth. I stared at him. I felt something in me go very, very still. "Just the babysitter?" I offered calmly. "Just the stand-in? Just the woman who made your life easier while you waited for your real family to sort themselves out?" "Mara, I didn't mean it like that." "No," I said. "You meant it exactly like that. And now I finally believe you." I took a deep breath and stood up. "Get out," I said quietly. He blinked. "What?" "Get out of this house," I repeated. "Take a bag. Go to a hotel. Go to your parents. Go to Carla for all I care. But you are not sleeping under the same roof as me tonight." "This is my house, too," he protested, standing up. "Then I'll leave," I said. I grabbed my purse and my keys. Either way, I'm not spending another night sharing a bed with someone who thinks I'm just a placeholder in my own life. He stood there staring at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. Maybe I didn't recognize myself either. I walked out without looking back. My hands didn't stop shaking until I pulled into Phoebe's driveway. She answered the door in sweatpants and an old law school t-shirt, took one look at my face, and stepped aside. "Guest room's ready," she said, "and the wine's already open." That night, sitting on her couch with a blanket over my legs and a glass of Pinot in my hand, I laid it all out. The money, the sentence, the house. "I'm done," I said finally. My voice sounded scraped raw. "I'm not just selling the house, Fee. I'm done being everyone's unpaid emotional janitor. I want out. Of the marriage. Of the drama. Of all of it." Phoebe nodded once, like she'd been waiting for me to say the words. "Then in the morning," she said, "we stop talking about what they did to you and start planning what you're going to do for yourself." The decision to sell Lily's house hadn't just been an act of anger. It was the first clear act of choosing me. Morning at Phoebe's house felt strangely calm compared to the storm raging inside me. Her guest room was small but cozy. A quilted bedspread, a bookshelf crammed with crime novels and legal texts, a window that let in soft gray light. For the first time in years, I woke up in a house where nobody needed me to cook breakfast, pack lunches, or listen to complaints. It was unnerving, and a little bit freeing. Phoebe had coffee waiting when I came into the kitchen. She slid a mug toward me, then sat down opposite, her hair pulled into a messy bun, pen already in hand. "Still sure?" she asked. "More sure than I've been about anything in a long time," I said. "I'm selling the house, and I want a divorce." She nodded once, like we were finalizing a business decision instead of rearranging my entire life. "Then here's what we're doing," she said, pulling out a folder. "We file for divorce today to establish a separation date. That matters for assets. We document your separate property, the house, your premarital savings. We freeze any joint accounts we can't immediately divide so Richard can't drain them out of spite, and we list Lily's house as soon as possible." Hearing Lily's name attached to the word house twisted something in my chest, but I forced myself to lean into the discomfort instead of away from it. "She's going to hate me," I whispered. Phoebe's expression softened. "She already treated you like you were disposable, Mara. The difference now is that there are consequences." I took a sip of coffee and nodded. "Okay, let's do it." The rest of the morning was a blur of forms and signatures: petition for dissolution of marriage, financial disclosures, retainer agreements. It felt clinical, almost impersonal, which was oddly comforting, like we were cleaning a wound. When she slid the last paper toward me, Phoebe tapped the spot where I needed to sign. "This," she said, "is you choosing yourself." I signed. By lunchtime, the divorce petition was ready to be filed electronically. While her paralegal handled that, Phoebe pulled up a contact on her phone. "You need a real estate agent who's fast, aggressive, and not easily intimidated," she said. "Patricia fits the bill." 30 minutes later, I was standing in the living room of the bungalow I had once given Lily as a symbol of unconditional love. Now I walked through it with practiced distance. Like any other property, the house felt oddly empty. There were a few pieces of furniture, an inexpensive couch, a coffee table, a bed frame, but no art on the walls, no photos, nothing that said home. Apparently, Lily had never really settled in. It looked more like a temporary pit stop than a nest. "This place has good bones," Patricia said, heels clicking on the hardwood as she walked from the living room into the kitchen. "Updated appliances, decent yard, great neighborhood. The market is hot right now. You bought 3 years ago?" I nodded. 200,000 even. I have the paperwork. She smiled. "We can list at 250 and probably get over asking. You okay with a quick sale if we get an all-cash offer?" "Yes," I said. "The quicker the better." While the photographer took pictures, Patricia asked me about staging. I watched the flash go off in what used to be Lily's bedroom and felt that now familiar mix of grief and steel. This room should have been filled with wedding plans, fabric swatches, flower samples, printed Pinterest boards. Instead, it was bare. As we left, I paused on the front porch and ran my fingers over the worn welcome home mat. "Not anymore," I murmured. That night, my phone began to ring. First it was Richard, then Lily, then Richard again. I didn't answer. Finally, a text lit up my screen from Lily's number. "Dad told me you're selling my house. How could you do this to me?" "You gave it to me. It's mine." I stared at the words, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. My house. There it was again. That assumption that my sacrifices were automatic, guaranteed, owed. I typed slowly, fingers steady. "I bought that house with money I saved before I ever knew you. I signed my name on the loan. I made every payment. I gave it to the daughter who loved me and wanted me in her life. You made it clear I don't have that daughter anymore. So I'm making choices for myself now." I deleted the last sentence, "Actions have consequences," because it felt too much like a lecture, and I was done begging her to see me. I hit send. 3 dots appeared, blinked, disappeared. Then a wall of text came in. "You're being so dramatic. It was my wedding. It was complicated. You're punishing me like a child. Dad said you're divorcing him too? What is wrong with you? After everything he and I have done for you. Everything he and I have done for you." That did it. I stared at the screen, that one sentence glowing like a neon sign, advertising exactly how little they understood. I blocked her number. Standing in Phoebe's guest room, I exhaled. "I feel horrible," I admitted when Phoebe peeked around the door. "You feel like you're betraying them," she said, "because you've been trained to believe that saying no is betrayal. But ask yourself this: who betrayed who first?" Images flashed. Richard in his suit, Lily on the dance floor, Carla beaming in photos. "I feel less horrible," I corrected. "Good," Phoebe said. "Horrible fades. Boundaries last." The listing went live on Monday. By Monday afternoon, Patricia texted, "3 showings booked already. By Tuesday evening, 2 offers. One at asking, one slightly over. Buyer number 2 is cash. By Wednesday morning, we now have 5 offers. Highest is $270K, all cash, wants a 30-day close." When she called, I was in the break room at the hospital, staring numbly at my tea. "This is your call," Patricia said. "We could counter, maybe push it higher. But this is already a very strong offer." I thought about the bungalow sitting empty while Lily posted photos from her honeymoon. I thought about my future in a way I hadn't allowed myself to in years. "Accept it," I said. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. I want it done." When I hung up, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. In 1 month, the house that had once been my love letter to Lily would belong to someone else. and I would walk away with more than $200,000. Clean, documented, mine. Richard called that evening from a number I hadn't yet blocked. "Mara," he said, skipping any greeting. His voice sounded raw. "Patricia told me you accepted an offer on the bungalow. You can't do this." "I already did," I said. "Lily is devastated," he said. "She and Mark were planning to move in there. They've already picked out furniture. You're tearing our family apart over hurt feelings." "Our family?" I repeated. "You mean the family that invited your ex-wife to our daughter's wedding and pretended I didn't exist?" Silence. "Lily is young," he tried. "She made a mistake. But you're the adult here. You're supposed to be better than this." "I am being better," I said. "Better to myself. I'm finally acting like my love and my labor aren't resources you get to exploit indefinitely. You all made choices. Now I'm making mine." "You're being cruel," he snapped. I laughed. It was a hollow sound. "You know what's cruel, Richard? Watching your wife cry herself sick over wedding photos while you stand there and say, 'You wouldn't fit in.' Cruel is funding your ex-wife for 5 years behind my back. Cruel is telling me the girl I raised isn't really mine. I didn't mean—" "You meant it enough to say it," I cut in. "And I heard you." I took a deep breath. "The house is mine," I continued. "Legally. I've consulted counsel. The money will be mine too. And you'll hear from my lawyer about the rest of the assets. From now on, any communication about the divorce goes through Phoebe." "You're really going through with this," he said, stunned. "I am," I said. "Because the woman who stayed while you erased her? She's gone." I ended the call before he could answer and blocked his number. Then I sat on Phoebe's couch and waited for the guilt to come crashing in. It did, but it wasn't as big as I feared. And underneath it was something sturdier, something that felt suspiciously like strength. 30 days after I accepted the offer, I sat in Patricia's office signing a stack of documents with my married name still printed neatly at the bottom. With each signature, another tie loosened. "And that's it," Patricia said, sliding the final page toward herself. "Congratulations. The sale is officially closed. Here's your check." She handed me a cashier's check with more zeros than I'd ever held in my hands before. $242,000. My throat tightened. "Most people get emotional when they buy a house," Patricia joked gently. "You're the first I've seen cry when they sell one." I wiped at my eyes. "It's not the house," I said. "It's everything it stood for." She nodded like she understood without me having to explain. On the drive back to Phoebe's, my phone vibrated nonstop in my purse. Messages from unknown numbers started piling up. When I finally answered one, it was Richard's mother, Margaret. "How could you do this?" she demanded, without so much as a hello. "That house was for Lily's future. You had no right to sell it. We welcomed you into this family, and this is how you repay us?" I almost laughed. Welcomed me. Like I hadn't heard her tell Richard years ago that nurses are nice, but not exactly the kind of professional woman we pictured for you. "You welcomed me," I repeated. "Margaret, you tolerated me because I did the work you didn't want to do. I cooked your son's meals and raised his child. And in return, your family stood at a wedding and pretended I didn't exist." "That's not fair," she protested. "Things were complicated." "You're right," I said. "It is complicated. But the ownership of that house isn't. It was mine. I bought it, I sold it, end of story." "You've turned cold, Mara." "No," I said. "I've turned awake." I hung up and blocked her too. Phoebe helped me open a new account at a different bank and deposit the check. Seeing the balance there, tangible and entirely mine, did something to my posture. I felt taller. "You know what this is," she said as we walked out of the bank. "A lawsuit magnet?" I joked weakly. She grinned. "Also that. But it's something more important. It's a runway. Money buys time to figure out what you want your life to look like when you're not sprinting from crisis to crisis." "I've never had that," I admitted. "You do now." Oof. The divorce itself moved forward like any other long-term separation. Richard tried to argue that he deserved a cut of the house sale. Phoebe rolled in with documentation: the purchase agreement, the date, my pre-marriage income records, the statements showing the down payment from my separate account. The judge ruled the house was separate property, untouchable. Richard's lawyer looked like he was chewing on glass. Richard looked at me like I'd transformed into someone unrecognizable. Maybe I had. What surprised me was how little I cared about most of the other stuff. I didn't fight over furniture, or the good dishes, or who got the big TV. I let him keep the family home if he could refinance and buy out my half. When it became clear he couldn't, we agreed to sell and divide the proceeds. I moved into a small, sunlit apartment above a bakery. The walls were bare. The furniture was mismatched. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon every morning. It felt more like home than the house I'd shared with Richard in years. At Phoebe's insistence, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Morgan. At first, I resisted the idea. I was the one people came to in crisis, not the other way around. Sitting on a couch and talking about myself felt self-indulgent. Then in our third session, Dr. Morgan leaned forward and said, "You spent 2 decades trying to earn a position in a family that had already decided your place." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Richard's words, "She's not your daughter," weren't new, she said gently. They were just finally audible. Somewhere in that house, in that marriage, there was always a hierarchy. You were at the bottom of it. You responded by overgiving, hoping things would even out. "And they didn't," I murmured. "No," she said, "because love and respect aren't wages you can earn if you just work hard enough. They're either there or they aren't." Her words sat with me long after the session ended. At the hospital, I found myself going through the motions, checking vitals, administering meds, charting. The work that had once felt meaningful now felt like someone else's life. "What did you want before all this?" Dr. Morgan asked during another session. "Before Richard? Before Lily? Before responsibility became your entire personality?" The answer slipped out before I could stop it. "I wanted to open an art gallery." She smiled. "Tell me more." I told her about the undergraduate art history electives I'd squeezed in between nursing classes. About spending my rare free Saturdays wandering through small galleries, feeling my shoulders relax in those quiet, curated spaces. About my dream once, of creating a place where new artists could be seen. "And why didn't you?" she asked. "Because we needed the money for Lily's activities," I said automatically. "For her college, for upgrades to the house, for Richard's business loans. There was always a reason." "And now?" she asked. "Now I have money I didn't expect to have," I said slowly, "and no one else to sacrifice it for." That night I sat at my tiny kitchen table with a notebook and wrote at the top of a blank page, "What would my life look like if I stopped centering people who don't center me?" The first item I wrote underneath stunned me with its audacity. "Open a gallery." Once the words were on paper, they wouldn't leave me alone. On my days off, I started walking through the arts district, peeked into vacant storefronts, noted which blocks had foot traffic, lingered in coffee shops to listen to how people talked about local art. One building kept catching my eye. It was on a corner, all tall windows and brick, with a dusty "For Lease" sign in one pane. On a whim, I called the number. 2 weeks later, I was standing inside, dust motes swirling in the sunlight, listening to the landlord talk numbers. "It's been empty a while," he admitted. "We had a yoga studio in here before, then a pop-up clothing shop. I'd love something stable. A gallery would be nice." "I'd have to renovate," I said, looking up at the ceiling. "New lighting, paint, maybe a small office in the back." "Rent is negotiable," he said, "especially if you're willing to sign a longer lease." At home, I ran the numbers. Between my savings and the money from the house, I could afford the build-out and a year of operating expenses, even if sales were slow. For the first time, investing in myself didn't feel reckless. It felt like reclaiming ground I'd been standing on for everyone else for too long. I signed the lease. The day I got the keys, I stood in the middle of the empty space and spun in a slow circle. The walls were scuffed. The floor needed refinishing. The air smelled vaguely of cleaning chemicals and old incense. To anyone else, it was just a tired storefront. To me, it was possibility. I named it the Mara Lane Gallery. Claiming my own name felt like a small act of rebellion after years of being Mrs. Lane, Lily's stepmom, the nurse wife. Renovation became my new full-time job. I cut my hours at the hospital, much to my supervisor's dismay, and hired a contractor. We picked out track lighting, debated paint swatches, refinished floors until they gleamed. One afternoon, I was standing in the half-finished gallery, Paint on my hands, hair pulled into a knot, when the bell over the door chimed. I turned, expecting the contractor. Instead, a man in his 40s stepped in, holding a rolled-up set of blueprints. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair flecked with gray at the temples. "Hi," he said. "I'm looking for the tenant. I'm Nathan Carter. I run the architecture firm 2 doors down. Heard we were getting a gallery in the neighborhood." "That'd be me," I said, suddenly aware of the smear of white paint on my cheek. "I'm Mara." His gaze swept the space, taking in the bare walls and dangling wires. "Good bones," he said, echoing what Patricia had said about the house. Only this time the phrase didn't sting. It felt right. "I hope so," I said. "Right now it just looks like chaos." His mouth quirked. "That's what everything looks like right before it becomes something." We talked for 20 minutes, about lighting angles, about foot traffic, about how galleries change neighborhoods. When he left, he said, "If you ever want a second set of eyes on layout, I'd be happy to help. No charge. I like seeing new spaces come to life." After he walked out, I stood in the empty doorway for a moment, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Interest. In me. Not as a nurse, not as a stepmom, not as someone's wife, just me. The gallery opened 6 months later on a soft spring evening. Friends came, nurses from the hospital, few of Phoebe's colleagues, the artists whose work I'd curated, mostly locals, mostly emerging, all talented. My mother flew in and cried in the doorway, pressing my hands to her cheeks. "You did this," she whispered. "For you." The room buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses. People stood in front of pieces I'd chosen, tilting their heads, leaning closer, talking about light and color and emotion. Nathan came too, in a crisp shirt and blazer instead of work clothes. He brought flowers and a bottle of champagne. "You turned chaos into this," he said, gesturing around. "Told you everything looks messy right before it becomes something." When the last guest left and I was turning off lights, he lingered by the door. "Can I take you to dinner sometime?" he asked. "Unless you have a strict no dating the neighbors rule." I smiled, surprised at how easy the answer was. "No rule," I said. "Dinner would be nice." As my life expanded, Richard's attempts to pull me back in simmered in the background. Emails about being reasonable in the divorce. Calls from new numbers I blocked as quickly as they came. A voicemail from Lily, crying, saying, "I don't understand how you can be so heartless after everything Dad and I did for you." I listened once, then deleted it. Dr. Morgan asked me in therapy, "What do you feel when you hear that?" "Tired," I said. "So tired of the story where I'm the villain for having limits." "And what would happen," she asked, "if you let them stay the villains in their own narrative while you step out of the play entirely?" "I think," I said slowly, "I'd finally get to live my own story." For the first time in my adult life, that story wasn't about being chosen by anyone else. It was about choosing me. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday, almost exactly a year after I first saw those wedding photos on Jennifer's phone. The courier delivered the stamped decree to the gallery mid-morning. I sat behind my desk, sunlight slanting across the polished floor, and ran my finger over the court seal. 21 years of marriage, reduced to a few pages. I expected to feel crushed. Instead, I felt light. Phoebe came by that afternoon with cupcakes and a bottle of something fizzy. "Technically, we should be toasting the end of a contract," she said, popping the cork. "But I think we're really celebrating the beginning of you not being everyone's unpaid emotional labor." We clinked glasses. Nathan joined us later, wrapping an arm around my shoulders as the three of us stood in the middle of the gallery. "To Mara," he said, "to doing the hard thing instead of the expected thing." After they left, I stayed late, walking slowly from piece to piece, letting the quiet absorb the day. My phone buzzed just as I was about to lock up. An unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it, but something, curiosity maybe, made me answer. "Hello?" "Mara," a hesitant voice said. "It's Lily." My chest tightened, but my voice came out steady. "What do you want, Lily?" There was a faint echo on the line, like she was calling from a tiled room. I'm in treatment," she said, "at a rehab center." Things got bad. After the wedding, after Mark and I, after everything, I did some really stupid things. I closed my eyes. The image of her as a little girl flickered behind my eyelids. Pigtails, scraped knees, chocolate on her face. I'm sorry that happened, I said carefully. I know you don't owe me anything, she rushed on. I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back. I believed Mom when she said you never wanted her around. I believed Dad when he said you'd be angry if she came back. I I didn't even ask for your side. That was on me. Not her. Not Dad. Me. Tears pricked my eyes, but I stayed quiet. I just needed you to know that I see it now, she said. You were the one who stayed. You were the one who waited in the car line and sat in the ER and made Halloween costumes. You were the one who bought me a house. And I treated you like you were optional. Her voice broke. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she whispered, or to come visit. I'm trying to get better. And part of that is admitting what I did. I'm so sorry, Mara. The old me would have rushed in with comfort, would have softened the blow, excused, minimized. The new me let the silence stretch. I appreciate you saying that, I said finally, and I'm glad you're getting help. Truly. But I can't go back to being the person you call when your life is on fire. That nearly burned me to the ground. I understand, she whispered. I hope you build something good from here, I said. For yourself. Not for your parents. Not for show. For you. And when we hung up, I sank onto one of the gallery benches and cried. Not the jagged sobs of betrayal, but quieter tears of grief for what could have been. Nathan found me there when he came by to pick me up. Lily? He asked softly. I nodded. Do you regret selling the house? He asked after a moment. I wiped my cheeks. No, I said. That house was a symbol of me giving everything with no boundaries. Selling it was the first time I chose myself. He squeezed my hand. Then remember that next time guilt comes knocking. Years passed. The gallery flourished. I curated shows that made people line up outside on opening night. I hosted panels where young artists talked about their work and their fears. I started a small grant fund for emerging talent, financed partly by the money from the house that had once been meant for Lily. It felt poetic. Nathan and I built a life slowly, intentionally. We moved in together after 2 years, combining my art books and his architecture models into a home that looked like a creative explosion. He never expected me to mother him. He didn't treat my emotional labor as an automatic inheritance. He made his own doctor's appointments. He did his share of the dishes. When I was exhausted after a long show, he ran bath water and left me alone with a book instead of complaining about takeout. One rainy evening, he knelt in the middle of the gallery after closing, surrounded by paintings and soft light, and asked, Will you marry me, Mara? Not to save me, not to fix me, just to walk next to me? I said yes. We had a small ceremony right there in the gallery. My mother walked me down the aisle between canvases. Phoebe stood beside me as my maid of honor. The room was full of people who had seen me at my lowest and never flinched. There were empty chairs in my mind, of course, ones that could have held Lily, Richard, some version of a family that had never really been mine. But their absence didn't feel like a hole anymore. It felt like space I'd freed up for people who actually valued me. A year later, I held my newborn daughter in my arms. We named her Hope. Not because I believed a child would fix anything broken, but because she symbolized something I'd finally allowed myself to do. Hope for a life that wasn't built entirely on sacrifice. With Hope, I felt something different than I had with Lily. Not more love. Love isn't measurable, but less fear, less performance. I didn't feel like I had to earn the right to call myself her mother. I just was. When she cried at 3 a.m., Nathan got up as often as I did. When she started walking, I wasn't juggling a double shift at the hospital. I was juggling gallery hours I'd chosen. I learned the hard way that when you don't value yourself, you attract people who won't either. But when you start choosing yourself, when you sell the house, file the papers, block the numbers, set the boundaries, you slowly build a different kind of life. One where love is an exchange, not extraction. Occasionally I heard about Lily. Through mutual friends, I learned she finished school and became a social worker, driven by some mix of guilt and genuine desire to help. She remarried a few years later to a man who, according to those same friends, was kind and steady. Carla drifted out of her life again when the money dried up. 5 years after the divorce, a letter arrived at the gallery. The handwriting on the envelope made my chest tighten. Mara, the Mara Lane. Gallery inside was a neatly folded page. Dear Mara, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I don't expect a response. I just needed you to know that I'm trying to be the kind of person you raised me to be. I work at a community center now. I see kids with mothers who show up and ones who don't. It makes me think about you more than I care to admit. I tell them things you used to tell me and hear your voice in mine. I'm getting married again. It's small this time. No big dress, no fancy venue, no curated guest list. I'm not asking you to come. I know I lost that right. I just wanted you to know that when I think about what a good wife and mother is, I think of you. I know thank you is too small for 21 years. I know I'm sorry doesn't erase what I did, but they're all I have, so here they are. Thank you. I'm sorry. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. Love, Lily. I read it 3 times. Then I placed it in a box in my closet, alongside a few old photos, tiny Lily in pigtails, Lily blowing out birthday candles, Lily hugging me after graduation. I didn't cry as I did it. I didn't rush to pick up the phone or email her back, but something in my chest loosened. Months later, on a quiet evening after we'd put Hope to bed, I finally sat at my desk in the gallery and pulled the letter out again. I grabbed a note card. Lily, I'm glad you're doing well. I'm happy too. That's enough. Mara, I mailed it. I didn't expect anything in return. I didn't need relationship or reunion. What I needed was peace. Selling the house hadn't been about revenge. Not really. It had been about stopping the story where I was the endlessly giving stepmother, always available, always last on the list when invitations went out. It had been about taking back something tangible from a life where so much of my investment was invisible and unacknowledged. Years later, when people asked how I'd found the courage to leave a 21-year marriage, I always thought back to that moment in the office when Jennifer's phone lit up. To the slap of realization when I saw my family smiling in photos I wasn't in. To the way my hands had shaken as I scrolled. I realized, I would say, that I'd spent 2 decades building a house on land that was never really mine. Selling the bungalow was the first time I decided to build on my own foundation. On the 10-year anniversary of the gallery, we hosted a retrospective show called Foundations. The opening piece was a mixed media work I'd commissioned, layers of old house blueprints, bank statements, bits of handwritten recipes, and pieces of legal documents, all collaged into a shape that looked vaguely like a house and vaguely like a heart. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to sell the house they took for granted to buy the life they never imagined you'd have without them." As I stood in the gallery that night, surrounded by art and laughter and people who saw me clearly, I thought back to the woman I'd been on that awful lunch break, sick with grief, shaking in a bathroom stall, swallowing the knowledge that her family didn't think she fit in with them. If I could have spoken to her, I would have told her this. They don't get to decide where you fit. You do. I locked up at the end of the night and stepped out into the cool air. Nathan was waiting on the sidewalk with Hope, now 10, perched on his shoulders, pointing at the moon. "Ready to go home, Mom?" she called. Home. Not a house I'd bought to prove my love. Not a place where my worth was conditional. A life I'd built where I was no longer the background character in someone else's story. I smiled, walked toward them, and knew with absolute certainty, selling that house had been the first domino. The day I stopped begging for a seat at a table that was happy to set my place without me and started building my own.